And welcome back. Our next speaker is Jill Benn, and Jill is a University Librarian at the University of Western Australia. Jill has significant experience in the leadership of libraries in higher education, and she's currently the chair of the Council of Australian University Libraries, or CAUL, and on the boards of the International Association of University Libraries and Research Data Alliance. Her professional interests include leadership development, open access to information, and learning space design. And I suspect that's what we're going to hear a little bit more about today. So welcome, Jill, over to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that I'm located today, the Whadjuk Noongar Budja, the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar peoples, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So many thanks to Alia for inviting me to speak with you today. My presentation is really going to be an overview of the transformation that we have undertaken within our library spaces at UWA over the last few years. And I really want to share some of the impact that those changes have had. And then I'll finish with some reflections on our experiences during the pandemic and some thoughts for the future. So I think it's always useful to remind ourselves how much has changed within libraries and how so much of that change is driving this transformation within our library spaces. And at UWA, this won't be unique for other academic libraries. We've seen massive shifts away from our physical collections. The number of book loans that we've had here at the university has gone down by over 70%. 75% in the last 15 years, and indeed last year only 7% of our on-campus borrowable collections were loaned, which was down from 7.5% the year before. So the number of physical libraries that we have here on campus has decreased. We've gone from 13 to 6, and staggeringly the number of library staff that we have to support library services has declined significantly from 150 in 2008 to just around 80 today. So we've seen huge automation and digitalisation of our services. But of course, at the same time, there's been a rapid shift and increase in the amount of online or digital services available. We now provide just over 1 million ebooks to our students and staff here at UWA. And of course, OneSearch, our discovery system, is very popular and is used a lot. So in 2014, as we could see this shift away from the physical collection, there was quite a lot of questions on campus about, well, what will the physical library be? And if no one is using the books, will it eventually all be online? But around that time, we started to actually see a really substantial increase in visits to the library. And this is what we were faced with in 2014. And again, this won't be unique, but we had a lot of empty and dusty shelves taking up a large percentage of the floor space. And this was really contrasted by significant overcrowding in the little collaborative space that we did have, with students studying on the floor being a regular occurrence. And indeed, one student commented in a survey that this particular overcrowded study area smelt like a locker room. There were so many people using it. So this was really starting to drive something. You can see these students here don't look particularly comfortable in the way that they're seated and speaking to each other. And we had postgraduate students studying in these types of conditions. You can see this student very, very cramped at her desk. This is one of our high degree research students. So the approach that we took at UWA was very strategic and deliberate. So we put a sign, a very clear sign, a clear message in our strategic plan that over the next 5 years in the student experience space, we really wanted to focus on providing interactive, flexible and collaborative library spaces balanced with the need to provide quiet spaces for reflection and individual study. And I think this is a really important point because there's been a really big shift to open collaborative spaces, but individual study spaces have remained as important as ever. And we really wanted to engage students in the design and delivery of all of our library services, not just spaces. And so I was really struck by Margaret's kind of comments about community and involving them, and we've certainly done that along the way. We also set ourselves some pretty ambitious measures of success. We wanted to increase student satisfaction and the availability of spaces for collaborative and quiet study. Now, we felt that strategic plan was a great start, but that our community needed a little bit of help in ensuring that we really took into account their views. And so one of the things we did, in addition to our strategic plan, was to create a space strategy. And this was really a vehicle for consultation within our communities, and it provided recommendations for the future management of print collections, because of course, as part of our change, there's lots of opportunities. You know, we've had this disruptive and transformative technological change, this move away from print collections, and it enables new opportunities, but it's not what everybody sees as a library. So we really wanted to be able to do that. We made a very clear point that the libraries do enhance student experience, student recruitment, and the university's reputation. And investment in the libraries is a very clear investment in what we value as a university. We said that we thought there were lots of opportunities for research in our libraries, and we made the point that we really needed to focus on excellent spaces for key postgraduate programs. So many of you will know of this building. This is the Reid Library. It's an iconic building. It's got a powerful presence, and it's pretty much located in the centre of the campus. The building, as you can see, features strong rectilinear lines and references to brutalist architecture. It opened in 1964, and we're really fortunate that it's surrounded by beautiful green space. And in 2015, we were allocated some funds to do a pretty major renovation of the ground floor. And this included significant donor funds that we worked with development and alumni to raise. And so this was a really one of the first projects we did under this program. So the goal of this project was to provide a space that was innovative and interesting, but at the same time comfortable and inviting, a space that said to our students, we value you, we want you here on campus, on a space that is the best space on campus. And we wanted to enable those students to use the space in new and innovative ways. We wanted different types of faces in our libraries. So the ground floor now consists of 700 seats for different types of collaboration and learning. We have a hard floor space adjacent to the cafe to enable students them to eat and drink. And we want students to feel at home here, whether they're studying alone and they want to study alone in a busy and vibrant space, or if they're with others, of course. And students have access to a range of technologies in the space, although as you can see, the portable whiteboards are particularly popular too. And I really like this picture of the student using a whiteboard in front of a screen. Some technologies remain pretty popular throughout. And in the centre of the space, and again, I was struck with the comments about centrepieces, because in the centre of our space, we have a transparent event space. This is called the Circle, and it was inspired by the concept of a theatre in the round. We really wanted to give a focal point to the space. You can see it's very circular, and that was very deliberate, again, because of the rectilinear lines of the building outside. And in this space, it's a very equitable space. Students can book it, people across the university book it, our graduates use it, and we've held hundreds and hundreds of events in here. It provides the opportunity for the university to really showcase innovative teaching and research in a really vibrant and busy space. We've held exhibitions, art competitions. It's been a really positive space to be. And of course, when it's not in use for events, it is just used for study. We really also wanted the library to look great from the outside. We are blessed with an incredible climate here in Perth. And so the terrace, as you can see there, was fully upgraded. And this has gone from being possibly the worst place on campus with a very dirty and smelly moat and asbestos-ridden pot plants to one of the best places on campus to study. In 2017, we were also successful in bidding for funds to refurbish our J. Robin Warren Library. This is located on our health campus, and the primary audience are our health students, medicine, dentistry and so on. And this project saw us relocate about 95% of our print collections off-site to create an array of study spaces for students. We really wanted to take our key learnings from the Reid project, but also ensure a very high quality space that differentiates this space from some of our other libraries, given this is a really important postgraduate cohort for the university, and that had been part of our original strategy. So the library provides a much higher standard of furniture and finishes. It includes a student kitchenette and a range of other spaces throughout. The project also included the provision of an e-learning suite. This is used in first year medicine. It enables the school to teach their students in 2 groups, 120 at a time, and it's used for collaborative study when not in use for teaching. Of course, because this library is located strategically next to 2 major teaching hospitals where many of our graduates are located, we decided to create an alumni lounge. This was some feedback that we'd had from students who were about to graduate who were very upset that they weren't going to be able to use the new library, and talk to us about how they'd love to come back. And so our alumni can use this space. There's access to a coffee machine, newspapers, and of course terminals where they can browse latest research. We've undertaken a number of other smaller projects in our law library, for example, which again have been funded through generous benefactor and alumni donations, but I'm not going to cover those now. But I did just want to mention one of our newest projects, because I think this really demonstrates how libraries can make major steps towards enhancing research support. Traditionally, we have supported education and learning, but this is the installation of the Digitisation Centre of Western Australia. That's in our UWA Barry J. Marshall Library, and this is a research partnership between all 5 WA universities, the State Library of Western Australia and the West Australian Museum. And it's been funded by the Australian Research Council, and it really hopes to meet the needs of much of the state's digitisation requirements over the next 10 years. So I want to move on now and talk about the impact of these refurbishments, because 5 years on, it's really great to look back and see what has changed. So, these projects, we set out at the beginning to try and increase the utilisation of the library, and we certainly did that by creating more study seats. So over the last 5 years, we've added 35% more, about 1,000 more study spaces. We now provide just over 4,100 spaces for our community. You can also see, based on the number of visits, the library transformation has really seen a lot more people coming into the library, and they are new types of visitors that we haven't had before. And one of my, I guess, favourite things is to run into a staff member who's also a parent to tell me how fantastic it is that their son or daughter is now using the library and they weren't before. On a busy day, so, for example, Tuesday this week, keeping in mind we are still recovering from COVID, we had 15,000 visits. So for a population size, we're a relatively small university, about 20,000 students. That's pretty amazing. I wanted to include 2020 there because although UWA was one of very few libraries that kept our physical spaces open to support our students, we did see a decline, and I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a moment. We've also seen increased student satisfaction, and this is a major strategic priority for our university. Research-intensive universities generally don't perform as well in the student experience surveys. So these are some results from the National Quality Indicators of Learning and Teaching survey. So you can see that for both undergraduates and postgraduates, our rating from students has increased, and we've gone from performing under the average at UWA for library resources and facilities to now being ranked 4th in the country. But I guess I think the most meaningful thing for me is student feedback. And these are some of the comments we used to hear from students before. It's hard to find spaces. And of course, you know, here's this comment about the collaborative area in Reid, very odorous. People couldn't find PowerPoints. It was very crowded. And after some of the comments that the students were making were, you know, it's modern and intelligent, inspires me to study at the library, it's comfortable and like home, it's stylish, and one student famously described it as student heaven. So I just wanted to talk, I guess, about what I see as some of the success factors for the projects that we have undertaken. And like Margaret, I mean, our experience is that the student engagement has been the most valuable thing for us. And we've had students involved at all levels. They've been on the governance groups around the projects, making decisions about budget, for example. But we've also had focus groups and surveys, and just done things like this, where we just put some chairs out with a whiteboard and asked students to tell us which chair they'd like us to choose. We had a really clear design brief for all of our projects. We looked at lots of best practice. I'm lucky to have also visited Doc 1 in Aarhus. And we had a really multidisciplinary design team, and lots of occasions we've been described as an involved client. And I think that's probably been a compliment and something that's been a driving factor. So what's next for the libraries at UWA? So we were really pleased to see that as a result of our efforts, there's now a library refurbishment program mentioned in the university's campus master plan. And so it's gone from being just an idea within a library strategy to being adopted within the university more broadly, which is great. So in preparation, we've been doing a lot of planning for a major upgrade for the rest of the Reid Library, as well as some upgrades in our other spaces. But then, of course, COVID happened, and you know, we witnessed a massive drop-off in the number of students using our space. And I just wanted to remind myself, I think, of just how dramatic this was. And this was the start of the national lockdown. In Australia, as I say, our libraries did remain open. Not all of them were open, and some were on limited hours. And you can see as the health crisis lessened in Western Australia, it did increase, but the numbers were pretty small. But I'm pleased to say, and I guess, you know, one of the things that we've been talking about in the Council of Australian University Librarians is the diversity currently across our universities and what we're seeing. Some universities on the East Coast are reopening and finding that people aren't coming like they used to. The numbers are small. And certainly when we first reopened in Western Australia, that was the case. But I just wanted to show you some data from the last 3 weeks, the first 3 teaching weeks of semester, to show you that we are in full recovery mode. And last week, we were back up to close to 70,000 visits, which was only a small decrease in terms of the year before, which I think is really interesting. But there's no doubt that the pandemic has had a significant impact on the academic sector, both here in Australia and abroad. There was a recent study undertaken in the US with 75% of survey respondents saying their library had experienced budget cuts and that they really weren't sure when they were going to recover. So there's lots of challenges, I guess, for academic libraries. We, like our institutions, we're suffering from the borders being closed to international students at the moment, and it's going to take some time for this to recover. And I guess what it means is that we're seeing capital projects being put on hold. We thought we'd be in our first year of a major library refurbishment program here. That's been pushed back a number of years. And of course, people are starting to talk about, well, is that really the priority? And so there's going to be some challenges ahead, I think, for academic libraries and libraries as we recover from the pandemic. However, that doesn't mean that we should just wait and see what happens. I think there's so much that we can do. There's so many positives that we can take away. You know, libraries were absolutely incredible during the pandemic in terms of the services they delivered and how quickly they transitioned. And the fact that libraries did remain open, was seen as an essential service in a number of places, really gives me hope for the future. And so I just just wanted to take two disruptors, I guess, that we have seen. Obviously, the pandemic itself was a disruptor, but two sort of side things are a broader delivery and take-up of online teaching and learning. So those of you who work in universities will be aware that, you know, our academic staff very quickly transitioned whole curriculums, whole units to online mode in a matter of weeks. It was really incredible to watch. And what's happened is, as we come back, much of that online teaching has remained, and you know, much of our curriculum is still being delivered online, even though we have relatively few restrictions here in Western Australia. But I see a real opportunity for libraries in that, because what's been so interesting is the students might not be going to lecture theatres or tutorials to learn, but they're still coming into the library. You could see those big numbers that I showed before, you know, 15,000 visits last Tuesday. And we really need to strengthen the library's position as a place for connection, contemplation, and community. The physical library plays a really important part in that. And of course, the other thing we've seen here at UWA is students coming into the library wanting to find a space to learn online. And so we've rapidly transitioned some of our very small group study rooms into what we did call Zoom rooms initially, but we've become a bit less technology or more technology agnostic. And so, you know, providing the kinds of spaces that students want for online learning, and really listening to our students and transitioning our spaces. As I said, you know, no doubt we're all experiencing lots of financial challenges. You know, you've probably heard there's been a lot of organisational change happening in universities and libraries across the country. And, you know, we're seeing significant budget reductions across the call group. We've seen holds or cancellations of library space projects in the centre, across the sector. But of course, that also, you know, let's think about what are the opportunities here. There's more opportunity for publisher negotiation than ever before. You might have seen just yesterday, University of California announced their new deal with Elsevier. You know, publishers are more open to that negotiation, particularly around open access. We've seen the benefit of more access to information. We have opportunities for new service models in our libraries. You know, during COVID, when we had the majority of our staff working from home, we centralised and digitalised lots of services. And I think there's new ways that we can do that. They're obviously more efficient and will assist us in that. And the last thing is, you know, one of the things that the strategy at UWA hasn't been to wait for a $60 million fund to upgrade all the libraries at once, or indeed even the Reid Library, just upgrade the whole thing. We've taken smaller amounts of funds and created the spaces, and then used the spaces to bid for funds for the next project based on their success. And so I think we're going to have to be more flexible and change the ways we think about our library refurbishments, to think about staging of works, you know, rationalisation of space, and certainly collaboration with others, because I think that will really strengthen into the future. I wanted to finish on this slide. I came across this photograph of the library at UWA. I think it was in the early 1960s, and of course a photo today. And it struck me, you know, how much has changed, but, you know, at the same time, how much has stayed the same. And I truly believe that libraries have got a really strong future ahead, and our physical libraries will continue to play a really important role. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill, and congratulations. You've got some great success stories there, and certainly some beautiful spaces. And we've got a few minutes for questions, and I've got some questions here, so if I can ask you those, if that's okay. The first one, and you did refer to the brutalist architecture of your building, and the question is, brutalist exterior doesn't lend itself to a warm, welcoming, flexible space. Did you find the interior design fighting the external flavour of the building? And have you done anything to soften the exterior or to make it playful?
Thank you. That's a really good question. So I'll start with, you know, what we did to soften the space. So the architects that we had, you know, there's been a bit of a policy at UWA to use the original architects of a building, and that's really reinforced the design all the time. I don't necessarily think that is a good thing, although it's made for a very beautiful campus. I think that this time we were able to use a different architect, and they were recent graduates from the university, and they came in and had this a concept of a very circular design. So when you come into the space, there's such a contrast and it's so soft. And because we were able to bring in natural light from all sides of the building, it feels so light and open. And, you know, we'd had some feedback from some of our Aboriginal students that the library felt really intimidating. So, you know, we have a mural as you walk in, which you know, has been painted, and it sits next to a cafe called Quabananing, which, you know, in Noongar translates to good food. So, you know, we've really tried to think about those elements of making the space feel inviting, because as you say, the outside is quite stark. We have tried to think about the exterior. Of course, we have heritage issues here. There isn't a lot of support for that, and you know, we continue to think about ways in which we can do that. Certainly, we're trying to activate all of the space outside around the building, and that's added the vibrancy. And I suppose we're very lucky with the moat on the exterior as well. So we really I suppose we're trying to soften the outside without actually touching the facade itself.
Thank you, Jill. A really quick question. Jill, how much did the egg chairs cost?
Oh, goodness me. Yes, I would hate to estimate. I would be wrong, but I can certainly provide that information post the meeting.
Great, thank you. Another question. Are there any aspects of the design of the Reid and Warren libraries which won't hold up post-COVID and need to be rethought? And I think this is something many of us are thinking about in the post-COVID world.
Yeah, so we obviously we have had to adapt the spaces as we've adapted to the different state restrictions. I'm pleased to say that hasn't been too challenging for us. You know, I suppose one of the things that we are recognising as we redevelop the libraries will probably make our group study rooms a little bit bigger than we have before, to allow people to better distance. And, you know, with our event spaces, obviously we're working with reduced capacity. So we'll have to think about floor space very carefully going forward. But thankfully, certainly in the newer libraries, there was a lot of flexibility built into the design so that we could really future-proof those spaces. And that stood us in good stead during COVID. It was more challenging in some of our other libraries where we had a lot of fixed seating. We weren't able to as quickly respond.
Thank you. I think one of the things that really impressed me in the slides that you showed was the quality of the fit out. And I think that really communicates to your clients that they're really valued as much as well, and that they're important to the university and to the library. And one of the questions that we've received is love the alumni lounge, and is it being used a lot? You know, what is the use of that lounge?
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been as used as much as we thought it would. And certainly during COVID, it wasn't used much at all. So I think one of the things that we felt with that space, we knew it was a little bit of a risk. It's not a massive risk in the sense that it's not a huge space, but we know that we could convert it into a meeting room or a group study room for students. So we'll keep monitoring it now that we're, you know, in recovery mode, and make some decisions. And, you know, that's one of my philosophies with library spaces. Sometimes it's very hard to try things out. It can be quite an expensive experiment, but where we can, we try and try things out and see how they go.
Well, they certainly look fabulous. And as I said, congratulations to you and your team on providing some fantastic spaces to the University of Western Australia community. And thanks for joining us today, Jill. And as we've said along the way, all the presentations will be available for delegates to view afterwards. We're nearly out of time, so I wanted to thank you and thank you, Maureen, as well, for her presentation. We're going to take a 15-minute break shortly, and then I'll be leaving and Janine Schmidt will be taking my place. So welcome to Janine after the break. But thanks again for joining us. Remember to use the hashtag Changing Spaces for the rest of the afternoon. And thank you, Jill, once again. Thank you.